Hi, my name's Keith Cooper and I'm going to have a look today at a newish fine art paper that I've been trying out. Now, this is a cotton rag paper, so it's an art type paper, and it's a bright white finish. Now this particular one comes from a local supplier here in Leicester in the UK called Paper Spectrum. What I would say to viewers elsewhere, because obviously I can only check stuff that's available in the UK, do have a look for similar papers around the world. You may well find them. This one is 310 grams per square metre, and it's a bright white, smooth, ever so slight textured surface. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to try this particular paper, and this is a profiling test chart, so I've made a profile for this, is that it's very close to what would be a bright white matte photo paper. Perhaps not quite as smooth, and it's also not quite as bright as some papers you can get, but it's a nice surface finish, and it profiles very well. And I say this box, this is an A3 size I'm trying, but I'm testing it on the Canon PRO-300, which is a pigment ink based printer. Now, I expect this to work perfectly well on something like P700, P900 as well. And although I haven't tested it in detail, it should give fairly good response on dye-based printers if they're more advanced ones like the PRO-200. Where I do think this is a very useful paper is for a printer with a mixed ink set like the Epson 8550. Now, I don't have the 8550 I tested here at the moment, so I can't offer any profiles, but I do have a Canon PRO-300 profile that I'll add to the list that's in the PRO-300 review, and they're available on request for non-commercial use. But anyway, here's the paper. It's a nice finish. As for all these papers, it's quite similar on both sides. It is only single-sided. But I would say if you're ever unsure of what side to print on, lightly moisten your finger, just touch on the corner, and it will feel slightly tacky on the print side. That's because of the ink coating, the receptor that's coated on it. Now, I've loaded the paper up here in the printer, and I've used the heavyweight fine art media setting for it. Now, you could use the the matte A setting as well, and I did actually make profiles for both. There's very little difference in them, if any. The difference is that if you use the matte A setting, you have to use the rear feed of that. Now, the rear feed is useful for some thicker papers. This is not a terribly thick paper. It's a nice dense paper, and it feeds perfectly well from the top slot. So if you're testing papers and you find that a particular setting won't work, so it requires the matte A setting, if you change it to HFA or heavyweight fine art, and this is for this printer here, then it'll work perfectly well as well. There's almost no difference that I can say. In fact, I'm going to say there's virtually none. So it just purely depends on what slot you want. Now, thicker papers, definitely. Stiffer papers, card, feed from the back. Paper like this feeds very well from the front. Now, the test image I'm going to use just for this, I've printed my standard test image and it looks fine, but I wanted to see what a particular type of image came out like. And I've taken an image here, and this is a photograph I took recently when I was testing a Hasselblad 100 megapixel medium format camera, which means there's a lot of detail in this. Now, I've cropped it and resized it to fit accurately on the paper. Now, that means I've set the image size to allow for 20mm margins on A3. Makes it a lot easier to position it. Now, the picture here, I'm printing this using the Canon PPL professional print layout software. Now, the Canon PPL software works very well. I've opened it up standalone. You can use it from Photoshop and other software as well, but it works from Lightroom even. If you just drop the image onto it, it will open up and you do the settings. Now, the settings here, I've selected single image, I've centered it, and I have specified the image size. Now I know what the image size is because I set it when I was editing. So I've set the image size at 257 by 380. Now on an A3 sheet that gives me a 20mm margin. That's a nice easy way of setting it. You can print borderless if you really want to, but I just wanted to do a simple approach here. Now I haven't resized the image either, so it's quite high resolution. It's probably about 700-800 pixels per inch resolution. Remember, this is a huge file, even though I'm printing at A3. Now I've set it here. I've selected the ICC profile I made, and this one is PRO-300, Pinnacle PCI B&W Bright White 310 HFA. Now I try and put in my profile names a reminder of what the settings were. Now when I've loaded a sheet of paper here, I've also set it to A3 HFA here. You don't necessarily need to do that, you can set it, but I find it easier when I'm testing just to set it here and set it here. Now this will normally override things, so you don't have to, but I do it because I'm testing papers a lot, and it's saved me over the years an awful lot of wasted paper. You may decide you don't want to bother, entirely up to you how you process, how you decide to do that. Now, the print here, I've selected for rendering intent, I've selected perceptual. Now I'm also going to print a black and white version of this in a moment, just to see what this paper's like for black and white. But this particular one, I've selected the perceptual rendering intent because for this particular image, the print looks better in perceptual. Now, sometimes they look better in relative colorimetric, sometimes perceptual. As I say, the soft proofing on this gives you a good guide, but perhaps not to rely on it too much. Matter of choice, whatever you choose. I don't use it very often, but it's worthwhile just checking for this. Now, set this up and away we go, and I'll press print. Now, I'm not pressing print now because I'm going to show the black and white one, because also I have one I prepared earlier, and here is that print. And it's come out really well. Now, in this light, I've got nice tonality. I'm still not sure for an image like this, I wouldn't rather print it on a Barita style paper if I was going to put it behind glass, if I was going to frame it, but it looks nice. So some images do work well with this kind of paper, but it's up to you to decide which ones you like. Now this one, that as a colour image looks okay. Normally for papers like that, I'll print much higher key, less saturated images. That's the sort of image I like to see on this sort of paper. This one's not bad. That one, less so. Just different types of paper. But I can't give any solid advice on which to do other than do things like printing the test image, do a few bits, see what you think of them. Now, I've noticed in this lighting here, this looks fine, has detail, lots of detail in the shadows. If you're going to be displaying this in dimmer lighting, you would probably want to lift the shadows a little bit and bring out a bit more detail in the shadows here. Because remember that prints vary how they look depending on the lighting. Now, as I've got it set up, this and this, they look to me pretty similar. So that's fine, no problems there. But do beware if you're going to show your prints in darker surroundings, say somebody's home that doesn't have much lighting, you may need to bump up the overall brightness of the print so it looks okay. It'll look too bright on the screen, but when you print it in light like this, it'll still look a bit too bright. But when you take it into a dim room, it'll look fine. Of course, if the sun comes out and it lights up, the picture's going to look too bright. So it's a matter of choice, depending on what you're doing, as to how much effort you want to go to like this. But as a straight one, this has had very little adjustment. This is out of the camera. It's 100 megapixel image. It's been cropped because it's a different aspect ratio from the camera. Yeah, that's very nice. Now to have a look at printing the black and white. Right, I've loaded a black and white version of the image. Quite a different looking image. I've processed this, very simple adjustment in Photoshop. I haven't used the Hasselblad software for this. Camera Raw handled this image quite well. Certainly for the kind of use I wanted to make for it. I didn't need any lens corrections or anything like that. And I've done this, and I've used an adjustment layer to convert to black and white. Now I've set it as the equivalent of a high contrast red filter. I've tweaked the levels a bit to try and get the overall contrast looking reasonable, and it's got quite a strong looking black and white image there. Now I've processed that in Photoshop. I've saved it as a full resolution, full quality JPEG image. 50 megabytes just for the JPEG image here, so it's not terribly quick on my slow old laptop. But I've set the professional print layout software. I've set that up, same paper settings, size settings as before, so it's fitted into the same slot as before, so it's going to print with that 20mm margin that I've set. The only significant difference is I have changed it to black and white photo print. Now on the Pro-300, black and white works really well with the black and white print mode. I've got a detailed review, a written review, as well as videos, and I've got a written article which looks at black and white printing in detail. And I would always say that if you want more detail about stuff, always look at the written articles on the Northlight Images site. Now that's partly because I record a video, and if something changes software-wise, that's it, I'm stuck with it. Whereas with the written reviews, I can go back, I can edit them, I can add extra information to them. So the videos are there to help and be interesting, but if you want the real detail, do check the written articles as well. But anyway, there's the black and white image. I've loaded up the paper here. It's set, it's sitting in there ready to go, and all I just need to do is just click on print. I get a reminder of the settings, and it tells me media type heavyweight fine art paper, which is the one I've set for this, and tone black and white. So we're just doing a basic black and white print, and I'll OK that. And it's popped up in the print monitor at the top here that it's working on it. Now this is a slow laptop. It's on a wireless connection, so I'm not expecting to show you this printing in real time. So we'll jump through. Paper loads in and it's off, it's printing. Now I'm printing this at highest quality setting. I did some experiments looking at printing on the 300 here, plus the 200 as well, and I used the high quality print setting. Well, actually I say I use the high quality print setting. If you're printing on the heavyweight fine art media, there is only the high quality setting, so it's going to run pretty slow. Nothing much happened. Yep, there it goes, it prints a little bit. It'll be a while printing, partly because I've got a huge great image, partly because I've got a slow laptop and it's on wireless. Just looking at the leading edge of it, not a mark. When you're using high quality papers like this, make sure they're flat, make sure they haven't got curled up edges, corners, all the sort of things that lead to marks on prints. Now this paper is quite thin and flexible, so it goes through the curved feed path very easily, has no problems with it. As I said, if you use thicker papers on this printer and the Pro-200 as well, it's better to use the rear feed path. Now I don't use it very often unless I need to, but sometimes you put thicker media through and it doesn't quite like going through the sharp bend that the paper has to follow to get this. Here comes the black and white, and it looks pretty good. I'll just wait for the rest of it to come out now. Well, there we are. There's one black and white print. It's worth darker prints like this leaving them a little bit to dry, because dark colours like this will change contrast very slightly over the course of 5–10 minutes as the print dries. But looking at that, not at all bad. Let's have a look at the colour version again. So there we have the colour version, and there we have the black and white version. Yeah, quite pleased with that. It's a nice looking paper. It's not a top-notch famous brand paper, but if you ever are concerned about getting papers from suppliers that you don't know, that don't have a big advertising campaign, remember there are only a few makers of paper in the world of this sort, and there are only a few specialised coaters who apply the coating that the ink goes on. So that's why I say have a look, and you may well find a very similar paper elsewhere in the world if you're looking for it. The black and white comes out good. I could have printed it with the profile, but I know from my testing when I did my profiling that the black and white mode comes out slightly better on this. I've not needed to change any contrast. It's a sort of quite strong image that I don't normally print black and white like this. If I did, I'd more likely perhaps do it on a Barita style paper, but I wanted to see how this paper would handle it, how the ink would settle on it, and it looks quite good. So there you have it. It is Paper Spectrum, Pinnacle brand, cotton rag, bright white 310. And yeah, very nice paper. So if you've got any questions about the settings and stuff here, please do ask. I've deliberately abbreviated it somewhat. I've got lots more videos and obviously the articles that cover details of printing on this printer and related printers as well. But I really just wanted to produce 2 prints here just to give you an idea of what kind of results you get with a paper like this. Hope that's been of use. Please do subscribe to the channel if you find it useful. It's much appreciated. And thank you very much.